404. So
Jan Spencer.
Jan Spencer, I'm on the board and I live on Benjamin.
Thank you. Hillary Kittleson.
Hillary Kittleson, and I live on LK.
Thank you. Phyllis's iPad.
You're muted.
Phyllis, you're still muted.
You may need to invite her to unmute.
I got it. Mitch and I live on Loretta Way.
Thank you. Brenda Wills. You are muted, Brenda.
I'm Brenda Wills and I live,
You muted yourself again. Brenda, there you go. Brenda, go ahead. We did not hear you before. Brenda?
Brenda is going to be a member of the River Song community and is
Okay.
on the Social Justice Committee.
Thank you. Robert Brack, whichever, sorry.
That's fine. It's Brack. That's yeah, I'm Robert Brack. I'm with the Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Office with the City of Eugene, and I'm here as a guest.
Thank you. Linda Smith.
Hi, I'm Linda Smith and I live on Loretta Way.
Great. Jolene Simpson. Jolene, you're muted.
I'm Elaine Simpson and I live on Hawthorne Avenue.
Thank you. Debbie B., you are muted.
Hi, I'm Debbie, and Bob and I live on Audell Avenue.
Thank you. Martha.
I'm Sadler. I'm a member of the River Song Co-housing community going up on Oakley Lane.
Thank you. Stefan.
Stefan Ostrek. I live on Mayfair Lane.
Thank you. Michael Richardson. Michael, would you like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
I'm Michael Richardson. I live on LK Drive.
Thank you. Jackie Worster.
Hi, I'm Jackie Worster. I am on the RRCO board and I'm on Jane Street.
Thank you. Jean Miccius. Forgive me if I botched that.
That's all right. Jean Mix, Park Avenue.
Thank you. Marion Malcolm.
Marion Malcolm, Mayfair Lane.
Thank you, Marion. B, 2 people.
Marv and I live on Horn Lane.
Thank you. Dwight Owens.
Dwight Owens, board secretary, and I live off Maxwell on Martin Drive.
Okay. Teresa Damron.
You're muted, Teresa.
Teresa Dameron, I live on Howard Avenue.
Thank you. Gwen Gwillen.
I'm Gwen Gwillem and I live on BB Lane.
Thank you. Mark. Mark, you muted.
Yeah, I'm Mark. I live on Arbor Drive.
Thank you, Mark. Let's see, who do I not have?
Harry.
Yeah,
Rihanna.
I've figured out where I'm at. Harry.
Harry Sanger, board treasurer, and I live on Rosewood Avenue.
Okay, thank you. Rihanna Williams.
Brianna Williams, I live on BB Lane.
Thank you. Beth Parsons. Beth, you're muted. Thank you. Beth, I believe you're still muted.
Okay, I got it. I'm Beth Parsons. I live on Sunny Drive.
Thank you. Hallery.
We did Hillary already. We're up to Stefan.
Hallery. Hallery, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, sorry, I can't chat. Okay. Catherine Hunt.
I'm Catherine Hunt. I live on Hanson Lane.
Thank you. Rihanna Williams.
Brianna Williams, BB Lane.
Thank you. Dan Isaacson.
Dan Isaacson, board member. I live on Hatton Avenue.
Thank you. John Quetzalcoatl. John, you are muted. I'll come back to you, John. Kathleen Allison.
Hi, John. Jack and I live on Arbor Drive.
Thank you. Matt Sprecher. Matt Sprecher, you are muted. There you go.
This is Matt Sprecher. I live on Arbor Drive.
Thank you. iSounds, whoever that is. Okay, we'll move back to John Quetzalcoatl. Still no response there. I assume he's away. Thank you, everybody. As you can see, we have a very large group, and if you aren't aware, our agenda is going to take us as planned to close to 9 p.m. So for that reason, I'm going to suggest that we not have public comment tonight and go directly to the board meeting. If anybody on the board is concerned about that, please speak up now. Okay, I'm sorry, folks. We just have to do that tonight. Okay.
John, point of procedure, does that need to be a motion?
Pardon, Terry?
Does that need to be a motion to skip an agenda item?
Only if somebody wants to decide that my ruling, as it were, is to be appealed.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the agenda. Dan, yes, Claire.
I just want to put out some of the rules, to remind people some of the rules of this meeting, which is that this is a meeting of the board and everybody else is observer. And I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
So to that end, we are going to mute everyone, and when board members wish to speak, they need to raise their hand as participants when they will be recognized. And somehow I just got muted. Okay, so now everyone is muted except for me at the moment and Claire. So Dan, could I ask a favor, and could you display the agenda as it was submitted, at least the spreadsheet therein, so folks can see the agenda? Can I ask you to do that?
Did you say Jan or Dan?
Dan.
I'm on my phone. I'd have to log into my.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Was another board member willing to do that? Jackie, could you do that for us?
Yep, I'm giving it pulled up 1 second here.
Thank you so much.
Apologies.
Oh, no, I totally understand. Dwight, your hand is raised. Would you like to say something?
Yes, just a real quick update on the Navigation Center. For those of you who don't know, Sarai Johnson is no longer with the city. They're looking someone to fill that slot. So right at the moment, they do not have a agency that replied to the RFP to run the center. So they're still planning on a July 1 opening, but that's been kind of derailed.
Okay, thank you. For the board, I am going to keep the time for our agenda items. Are there any other announcements from the board that are important to make tonight? Okay.
John, I have my hand up. You didn't see me.
Please put your hand up in the Zoom process, if you would, under reactions, raise hand. Otherwise, I won't see it. Thank you.
This
But
thing
go ahead,
here?
Jan.
Yeah, okay. I just want to mention, I put into the chat the Zoom information for a Zoom get-together of the Green and Resilient Lifestyle Group, which will be Thursday, February 24th. That Zoom login info is in the chat, so feel free to join us.
Okay, thank you, Jan.
Jackie?
Okay,
Jackie's next in queue.
Yeah, I was going to share the screen here. I don't have permission to share in the Zoom.
Okay, hold on. I did make you a co-host, Jackie. Can you try
Right.
again?
Yeah, there is no button at the bottom. I can pause and stop the recording, but I don't have a share button.
and I don't see one either, Claire.
I don't either.
Is it possible that that's something that got set at a higher level in the setting or something? That might be bad news for the meeting.
Are we able to post the agenda in the chat, or do we have to share?
Claire probably has to share everything.
I could
No,
post
I
the
don't have a
agenda,
screen
but-
share either.
Because even as the host.
I don't have a screen share. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm lost. I don't know what to say to that. I've never seen it without the share button before. So.
Sorry about that, folks. Do you want to read the agenda real quick?
I put it in the chat. Unfortunately, it's not in the best shape, and it's only the first 3 items. Damn, excuse me, inappropriate, John. Okay, I will read it. Item number 2 is to approve the consent calendar. Item number 3, Robert Brack is going to facilitate a board discussion on respectful interaction. Number 4 is to create an ad hoc committee to research voting processes for our March election. Item number 5 is to plan for the March election. Item number 6 is to approve the board job description. Number 7 is disclose all information resulting in December board vote on vaccination clinic. Number 8 is to reconsider the vote held on vaccination clinic. Number 9 is RRCO's board policy on equality. Number 10 is action on Zippo laminators from our last general meeting. Number 11 is to define meeting topics for our future meetings. And number 12, scheduled now for 8:50, is to adjourn. So that's the best I can do. I apologize. Shall we move on to approving the consent calendar? The consent calendar has six motions in it. If any of the board members wants to pull any of those for later consideration, that now would be the time to do so. Otherwise, we'll approve those motions still remaining in the consent calendar. Does anyone wish to pull anything from the consent calendar?
Harry has his hand up.
Yes, Harry.
Yeah, I move that we remove A.A, A.B, B, D, E, and F from the consent.
So the December 13th general meeting minutes. And then what else?
The December board meeting minutes.
Okay. And what else, if anything?
The announcements policy. I just think a policy needs to maybe even be a bylaws change. Not
All
just,
you have to do is do it. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not
at least
arguing. I'm
merits
just saying
discussion.
it's bold.
Amendments or announcements. The login motion D. The ad hoc committee for Cascade Housing E. And the policy for meetings F.
So everything but C, I take it.
C and the January 10th general minutes looks great to me.
Okay, well, that will extend our meeting if we're going to do it tonight, but that is your privilege. Joshua.
Oh, did he pull the one that I was wanting to talk about?
Um,
The one about saying the letter. I just wanted to make sure we had that.
That's pretty much the only one left.
Okay, let's remove it. Just
Okay.
to, you know, it seems like the kind of thing that we should at least have a quick chat about.
Okay, so let's add those to the agenda.
Dwight
And
has his hand up.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Dwight.
I'm having audio difficulties. It's being really hard to understand. Harry, could you put your agenda items you wanted to remove in the chat, please?
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Dwight. Okay.
Can I have a question, clarification? Are those agenda items to be removed for discussion tonight or to be remade into agenda items?
I suggest, I was going to say, let's put them at the end of the meeting. And at that point in time, we can decide whether or not we have time to consider them.
Okay.
So without objection, that's what I will do. Hearing no objection, let's move on. Okay, item number 3, a 30-minute item, facilitated board discussion by Robert Brack on respectful interaction at meetings. Robert is the Eugene Office of Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Neighborhood Program Coordinator. He's graciously agreed to meet with us and facilitate a discussion on respectful interaction. And this is based on board members requesting them that we have this discussion. So Robert, I'm turning it over to you and I will be timing you.
All right, thanks. And hello, everyone. Glad to be here. I've attended a couple of River Road meetings and have had some interactions with various people, so I do appreciate the time. So my goal of being brought in is to be a facilitator of conversation around what to do with respect and disagreements and within boards, and then also try to how groups can either rely on their bylaws, but then in some cases bylaws don't cover everything. And so what do you do when that's the case, or when there's like a gray area? And just try to have a facilitated conversation with you all about really how you do your work and how you are a group as a board. And so I just wanted to present a couple of things to you just to kind of sit with. And so this is more for you first, like you personally as a board member. And then after some discussion, what we'll do is we'll move into what that means now for your group. All right. And so I know that this is not necessarily the best environment to do this type of conversation. You know, how do groups interact? And we're doing that at a two-dimensional space where we're all kind of by ourselves or with another person. And so I just want to acknowledge that this is not the best format for that, and want to encourage you all to, one, kind of roll with it, and two, know that this could be the first of many types of conversations. Okay, so I in no way imagine that anything that we talk about tonight is going to just miraculously help restore or help encourage like that feeling of respect and attention and care for what you do as a group. So that's something that is going to take time. So with that being said, I also wanted to be clear, I understand that there's both board members here as well as members of the community. And as someone who doesn't regularly attend your board meetings, I may not know exactly who all that is. And so I see a lot of different screens open. I just ask that if you're a board member, just to please have your screen on, just so that I can see that. And it might also even be helpful if you edited your name and just put like a B at the end. That might also even help me. But so my, kind of goal of me being here again is just to start a facilitated conversation. And so one is that, you know, being a part of a board member is, it's pretty difficult. The way that most boards interact is through some rules and guidelines that try to help assist boards with getting their work done. And we mostly know those as Robert's Rules of Order, or in some cases, the adapted Bob's Rules of Order. And most people use this as a guideline to try to frame their discussions and have some sense of how to interact and have conversations. The problem is that is when those rules are not either one, understood by everybody that's on the board, or two, they just can get very nuanced and they separate what might be the intention of those rules and those guidelines being put into practice in the first place. And so what I want to do is just try to go back to some of those intentions, which is that you're creating a space as a board for you all to have dialogue to decide what's the work of the board moving forward. And this is true for any board, right? Any group that meets like this, they have to be able to, as a board, come together as a group, have conversations and dialogue to try to figure out what's the best course of action. And then they have a bylaw that then says how we vote and how we now decide, okay? But what it doesn't do is it doesn't explain to a board what you do after a decision is made, all right? After that's decided, right? You've had conversations, you've had interactions, you've shared some things, and now if a board has now decided, a collective group has decided to move forward, that doesn't mean that all of those interactions just now go away, right? They carry themselves forward through other discussions or other things. And so those can create a lot of stress and tension. They also can, if you just think about any conversation that you have with a person that now gets heightened, you know, we've all experienced that increase in heightened conversations. And what we have to do is we have to respect the fact that we are in a conversation that's gotten heightened. And some people use words to describe that, about that feeling. You know, some people call it conflict. Some other people call it disagreements. You know, others I've heard, there's material out there called Crucial Conversations. That's another one, which I highly recommend that book as well. But the idea, right, is how do you take care of yourself and how do you regard the other person in these heightened moments, right? And so these aren't just regular conversations like, you know, like my partner and I deciding where we're going to go have dinner, right? That's not a level of heightened conversation that we're addressing. That is to say that it can't heighten it if it's like an anniversary and I decide I don't want to go to a restaurant that you like. Now it can be. And so so when you think about it, you know, when you look at what your board is doing and the work that you're doing in the neighborhood, I can totally understand if conversations and things like that get heightened, because this stuff matters to you and it matters to your neighbors and it matters to your neighborhood. And that is okay, right? It is okay for you as a board member to have your opinions and to have your perspective and bring that into a meeting. That is okay. What we have to do, or what I try to encourage boards to do, is to not just have conversations or enter into those conversations with the idea of this is my perspective that I'm going to try to get across, and to use the word sell. If you are trying to say, like, sell your idea, we should all be doing this, we should be doing this, it creates the opportunity for people to not buy that idea, you know, essentially. And then we're dealing with that tension of what happens when I'm communicating this way. the other way that I like to put it for boards is that when you share your idea or you share your perspective or what you think should be the decision that gets made when you share that, that you are sharing it in such a way that makes it equally likely for other people to share their idea or to share their perspective, right? And it's a push-pull of inquiry and advocacy, okay? If you have, if I could, if I was able to share my screen, I could do this, but if you can imagine like inquiry, right, is asking questions, right? And I usually do that with groups and with people when people are hesitant to share their idea perspective, or someone in your group or your board isn't like, they're not disclosing what they think that we should do or what their idea is or things like that. If they don't, feel like they can share their perspective, then I would use inquiry. I would ask, hey, what is your opinion? What do you think we should do? Or what do you think we should consider? That's an inquiry position where I'm asking questions in order for someone to enter in the conversation. And then there's advocacy, right? And advocacy is disclosing what your position is or disclosing what comes up for you, right? And those are inquiry and advocacy. Those are fine. Those are great tools to use. The problem to be aware of is to recognize when advocacy is used negatively and it starts to sound imposing, okay? And to be cautious of that. That's your own self-awareness to be cautious of how we are advocating our position, okay? And to recognize when advocacy may tip over to explaining or declaring, or not explain. Actually, explaining is okay. It's imposing. That's the word I was looking for. Imposing or declaring. Okay, and that's like one extreme of advocacy. Inquiry can also be used negatively if it's used to peppering a bunch of questions or having people explain to a point that they feel uncomfortable. Then it's like this. It's negatively interrogating. Okay, that's where inquiry can go too far overboard. Okay, so finding that right balance of advocacy and inquiry on a board is important so that you all can get to what's the information that we're using to make our decisions to go forward. Okay. So as you go through your work as a board member, I would encourage you to balance or be self-aware of how you are balancing inquiry and advocacy, okay? Both for yourself and the other members of your board, okay? The last thing that I wanted to share with you all too is when you get to that place of balancing those two things and your board is able to stay in that role of advocating your thoughts and your opinions, but also inquiring and hearing what other people's thoughts and opinions are, and getting to that place of dialogue where you can listen to each other, then what starts to happen is you create, and again, I would use visuals for this, but you create a circle where all of you and your board members are in this group. And the idea is that there's a lot of challenges that are coming to your neighborhood, and you are able to talk about them within the circle, within this group, in this meeting, in a way to decide how are we going to address these issues or deal with these challenges as a group, all right? Or what are we going to do in our, specifically for boards, neighborhood boards, what are we going to do in our neighborhood that meets our goals as a board, right? For our neighbors, for our community. Because there's all sorts of things that are coming at you, right? And coming at your neighborhood. And the idea is that you as a board are being strong to talk about those, deal with those issues, address your concerns with each other, and then be that collective voice that goes out into your community of saying this is our stance with our board. The challenge is that if within this circle there are additional issues and you're not dealing with conflict very well, or you haven't addressed or come up with some other solutions that maybe isn't clear in Bob's or Robert's rules of order, or it's not clear within your bylaws, that's okay, because what you're really doing is trying to establish some ways of interacting with each other so that you still stay a group. Because if you're fighting internally, that's going to make it much more difficult for you to also address the challenges that are outside of your board. So the intention for you to really, self-manage, be self-aware of how you are in that board member, in the board, and then also how you want to deal with conflict. Those are only going to strengthen your board, okay? And then that's going to set you up to have better conversations with your community. So I guess before I continue, just really quick, want to give some space just to hear from some board members, and just a really quick, I would say just a really quick 2 minutes. What are your general thoughts on what I'm saying so far? All right, and then we'll kind of move the discussion into what we mean as a group. But for you individually, what's coming up for you, or what's either what are your comments or questions about what I've said so far?
And Robert, to make that work, if it's all right with you, I will call on people who raise their hands in the participation list.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, John.
Okay, so board members, if you would like to speak at this point, please raise your hand on using the reaction button, raise hand. I see Charlesy. Charlesy, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, yes, thank you. I just want to acknowledge and thank you for putting in some kind of a balancing piece, the use of the words inquiry versus advocacy and the extremes of each, and how that is becomes rather dysfunctional. And I think it's very helpful to have that model, at least in mind as we move forward, because it's felt that we've lost sight of that. And so thank you very much, Robert, for making that clear.
Before someone else shares really quick, I do want to say that I did kind of forget one more of that, and it's when inquiry and advocacy, when they're not used at all, right? And that's the opposite. That's called withdrawing, right? And so when people are not inquiring or they're not advocating, they're essentially withdrawing as a board member. And I would pay attention to that just as well, right? If someone in your group is just not sharing anything, and despite some inquiry statements or saying, like, we really want to hear from you, and they still don't want to, that's withdrawing. And there might be some questions to ask there, both for yourself or at a different time. Thanks.
Claire,
go ahead.
So maybe we'll get into this in a minute, but where on this mode of discussion does accusation and come in?
Yep. So if accusations are, again, that's a word that we would use to describe someone sharing their opinion or their perspective as a fact about somebody else, right? Or about something else. And that, they may be doing that, right? Like if well, it just depends on what it is that I guess it's situationally dependent, but it's what we're talking about. It's if a person is saying, for instance, if I'm advocating, I'm strongly advocating, and I'm like banging my hand on the table, or I'm, shaking my fist, or you can see the veins popping in my neck, or things like that, because of what I'm saying. One person may say, like, wow, Robert's really angry, Robert's really mad, or that I'm really upset, right? And another person might say, Robert's just very passionate. Robert's very like engaged, and fired up, and it's possible that, so that would be like someone saying or interpreting what I'm putting out there as fact or what's going on. Okay. And it's not to say that either of those aren't true or that, that both aren't or anything else like that. But what is going on is people might interpret those things that I'm doing as, dominating, or they say that that's too much advocacy. That's that's imposing. That's too much. That's imposing. And so it's okay to be mindful of that. It's okay to say, like, Robert, you're slipping over to imposing, or your advocacy is too much. But that might be your perspective. Like what I would do in that type of a situation, I would acknowledge, like, hey, Robert, I can see that you're very passionate about this, and I want to hear from you. Right now it's a little hard for me to hear what you're saying just because of how you're saying it. And I want, but it's another thing to say, but I want to hear you. I want to hear what you have to say. And so that's offering feedback to someone so that you can return to conversation, return to dialogue. Okay. It's not to shut the other person down or not want to hear what they say, or even try to restrict how they say it. It's more of like, I just want you to know that from my perspective, that's how it's coming across, and I want to hear you. Okay.
Harry?
Yeah, Harry, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Hey, Robert. So thanks for joining us. That was great. I really appreciate your perspective and how you framed everything. But I guess my question would be, once the negative inquiry and/or advocacy is breached, what methods are useful to return to an even keel? And then along with that, what are ways to deal with community chatter that continues outside of the board environment?
Great questions, especially for boards. Those are excellent questions. So one method is to disclose what it is that you do want, while saying what it is that you don't want. Okay. So in other words, if something has gone too far, or someone is like, advocated too much, or they're inquiring too much, like they're peppering with questions, and they're realizing that that's what's happening, or someone else, helps point it out, you can reframe it and you can say, like, again, like, I want to, like, I kind of said that, or used that example a second ago, like, I want to share what I'm thinking. I don't want to impose what, my perspective on somebody else. I don't want it to feel that way. I want to share what I'm thinking. And so you can say, like, what it is that you want and what it is that you don't want. And we call those contrasting statements. The other is that you can try to declare what it is that you want, or declare like a level of decorum that you want before you say something. So in other words, you can say, like, this is a topic I care about. I want to share my opinion, but I'm not looking to, like, derail something, or I'm not looking to get off topic. I'm just really, I just care about this thing or something. You can kind of frame it that way, or front load it that way.
John has his hand up.
And one more thing, because I wanted to get to this other question too, but so again, some methods would be to just either acknowledge it, say, like, yeah, I got carried away, or yeah, I'm going over too much one way or the other, and then try to correct it. The other would be to try to give some space for people to, I would say, return to the group in some other situations or some other things. Like, we all get hooked. We all have our things that come up for us, whether it's someone interrupting, or whether it's someone using language that we might not resonate or agree with, and so we all have things that kind of can, trigger us or hook us in a meeting. And it's just to be self-aware of that, self-aware of what those things are, so that you can then manage how it comes up in a meeting, and sometimes that takes talking it over with somebody else, or putting it out there in that way. But then other times that's your own self-work. I have to do that a lot with some meetings that I have, that, if there's a person that I don't get along with or whatever, I have to really self-manage that I'm not like ready to pounce on them right when they say something I disagree with, and that's my own work that I would have to do. The other question is like the chatter, or like what happens afterwards, the chatter that happens outside of your group. And as a board, like, if a board wants to be, like their own group, like that's working on other stuff within the community, then you have to kind of stop some of that stuff, that happens outside of that board. And it's saying things like, I really care about this other person on the board. Yeah, we've had some disagreements, but I care about them as a person, and I respect their position on the board, that I'm not going to talk about this outside of that group. Or, so you might have to do that, or other people may be talking about it, and you might have to just say, like, hey, I know that we're all really concerned. I know we're all really, that this matters. And I respect you all to want to have that conversation with just in this group. And so it's pretty much every board member's responsibility to try to do that in the groups that they're involved in, or in the other situations, that around the community that they're involved in, to try to help do that. And that's getting to a point of having a respectful regard with each other. And if that respectful regard is breached, then there might have to be some pair conversations that happen, right? To try to help restore that. And that's a little bit of grace. That's a little bit of willing to hear feedback from other people that you might not be comfortable with. And that's kind of that board work, right? Of saying, like, I respect the work that we do, and I respect the position that we are elected into, enough that I want to try to make sure that these relationships work while we're all on the board together. John, you had your hand up.
Yeah. First of all, we have 4.5 minutes left for this item. Second of all, I think you're getting close to an issue that I'm concerned about, and that is, I have been contacted by members of the neighborhood saying that they've heard an individual who is on the board making public statements, and they're wondering whether or not those statements are statements by the board or by that individual. And I'm thinking maybe we need a policy that when one of us board members speaks, we need to state in a public event, in our meetings, that if we're sharing something, that it's our personal opinion and not that of any organization we're part of. What do you think about that?
I mean, I would say that's a question for the board. Like that's any rules or guidelines that may not exist in Bob's rules or Robert's or whatever you're using, or that don't exist in your bylaws. It is up to the board if you want to put motions forward that try to help explain that gray area more, right? And that's fine. I also think that sometimes you just need to be cautious too as a board, that you don't get into a rabbit hole situation of trying to have a rule, for a lot of different things. Bylaws can get pretty long that way, which they make good bedtime reading as it is. But you just have to sometimes you just have to be careful. Are we putting a rule or a guideline in place because I don't want to have the conversation? And that's just something worth self-checking as a board. Like, are we? I've seen this in work teams or work environments, right? I've worked with a lot of different organizations where an organization may say, hey, everyone, this is the new policy. And but they would rather just write a policy, you know, that everyone's socks are blue, rather than talking to the person who might like to wear fun and creative socks, you know. And so you just have to be careful of that and balance that and have that discussion as a board. It does.
2 minutes, Robert. You want to close up?
Yep. It does. You do also have to be aware that as a board, that you do have that voice in the community when you do share your opinion, or you do share, this is what I think we should be doing, that others may, outside of your group or your circle, will not be aware of some of those conversations. And you may have to take that initial step forward and go, you know, this is my thought, you know, as a neighbor, or this is my thought as a board member, but it's not the position of the board, or the board has not discussed or decided this. And so that you're not, you're making that very clear to the rest of the community that that we still have to talk about this in a group. And I may have this opinion, but you have to hear that it's my opinion. It's not the board's opinion yet. Charles, real quick question, and then I'll wrap us up.
Charles, you're muted, but we have 1.5 minutes, Robert.
Okay. Okay. Chelsea. Oh, there we go.
Okay, there you go. So my question is, I understand that Lane County offers school board training on boardsmanship, and I wondered if the city offers anything like that, or team building that the board could take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So we do offer in the past, we've offered what's called a Neighborhoods 101, which just gives an introductory info into boards. It covers a lot of info. We are looking into the calendar this year about when we will offer that, and we'll make that known to everybody. That used to be my gig, is team building and group development and leadership development. And so while I am in this position, I am absolutely that resource to do that. And you could have an executive board meeting that's more closed. And again, that's not to try to get away from we don't want the public to hear what we're talking about, but just gives you a more closed group to say, hey, let's actually talk about what's coming up for us. And I'd be happy to help facilitate those meetings or conversations. In closing, I would say I'm also happy to come back to this meeting and either hear your questions, or Robert, can you give us some info on this, and I can do a follow-up. So, but I'm happy to continue to support you all, and also happy to just be in conversation with what you feel like you need, so that your group can get to that place of, we have some work we need to do in our community. We're excited about it, and we want to be a strong board that is not so concerned with just the inner dynamics, that we can deal with all those outer dynamics of our neighborhood that we want to consider. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Almost right on 30 minutes. Obviously, you gave us some good stuff, but I bet we'll ask you to come back. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, John.
Good. Let's move on to item number 4, which is to create an ad hoc committee to research a voting process for our March election. So what I'm going to do is very quickly introduce this and make a motion, so we'll have time to talk about it. Unfortunately, we only have 5 minutes for this item, so hopefully we can get the job done in the time that we have. So it's pretty clear that our March 2022 board election is going to be held by Zoom, and it will likely have, in my opinion, more than 4 candidates. So we need a method to determine how to hold that election within Zoom. So here's the motion I would like to make. The RRCO board shall form an ad hoc committee to research options for holding the RRCO board elections at the 2022 March general meeting held via Zoom. That committee will make their recommendations based on the criteria approved at tonight's board meeting. They will report their recommendations to the board at the February board meeting, when a decision will be made how to hold that election. The board, in my proposal, appoints Joshua as chair, and myself and any others who want to be on the committee. It will sunset after the executive board decides how the election will be held. And I've got some potential criteria for selection method. If we approve the motion, we can talk about those criteria. So is there a second for that motion? Chelsea is seconding. Okay, any discussion? Please raise your hand in the participants list if you would like to discuss before we vote.
No hands are raised.
Harry.
So I would ask why we're to be remote and whether it's possible to plan for having an in-person to facilitate the voting, even if the plan is to hold that outside at the picnic shelters at Emerald Park.
So I think it's our board's position that we are not going to meet in person until the issues of this COVID epidemic are resolved. So are you proposing that we make the March meeting an open meeting? Harry? You're muted.
I couldn't unmute. This whole format is becoming more and more laborious, and this idea that board members can't unmute themselves is detrimental to effective business. But I guess as a point of information, did we as a board decide what our return to in-person meeting criteria was?
My understanding is we need to vote to do that, and we have not done so. So are you proposing that we make the March general meeting an open meeting in public?
I would propose that we leave that on the table.
Well, we can still research the possible need for software to have that election if we don't make that decision. So I'm not sure what you're saying. Are you saying we shouldn't form a committee in case we don't meet in person in March to be determined at a later date?
I'm on the fence with vote because of that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Claire?
May I suggest that meeting in person is one of the options that the subcommittee consider?
Good point. Okay, any further discussion before we vote? Jan? You need to unmute, Jan. There you go.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think everybody wants to get back to meeting in person. I mean, this is Zoom is great and it sure is filling the gap. But like everybody, we don't know what the virus is going to do next. I think that when the public health authorities start giving us some suggestions about when it's safe to do something like that, I think everybody wants to do that.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion? Okay, I see none. So all those in favor of forming this, Dan, would you like to say something?
Yeah, sorry. If we're entering as things to consider, have this committee look at, I know the city and some other folks have gotten that OWL system, which allows for quasi in-person / online. I don't know if we can borrow that or source it, because that way we can have folks who feel comfortable coming if that's what the decision of the body is, but also allow folks who do not or are immunocompromised to stay home.
Okay, shall we add that to the charge of the committee? Should it pass?
Sure.
Okay. Any further comments or questions before we vote? Okay, well, let's vote. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your hands either as a participant with your hand raised or
Electronically, please.
yes, electronically. Thank you. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favor. So the motion passes. So very quickly, I listed a series of potential criteria for selection method. if anybody either wants to suggest that they not be included or want to add any, please put your hands down, folks. I'll read them very quickly. The criteria for the method that we vote for should do the following. Ensure that only RRCO members in good standing can vote. Charter requires it. Only those who are in attendance at that meeting can vote, also required by the charter. The voting process should be easily accessible, ideally within Zoom or whatever method we choose, and available to those who are phoning in as well. If it's a standalone software, it should be free or reasonably priced. Ideally, the process should yield immediate results. Individual votes should be confirmed, but ideally they will either be unavailable for sharing or only available to the vote counters in the charter. And finally, ideally, the method would be usable for voting in general meetings held by Zoom. So does anyone want to add any more criteria or suggest any be removed? Harry.
So we were talking about leveraging city resources. One thing that might be an option would be to hold it as a Teams meeting instead of Zoom that has a built-in polling feature.
Okay, thank you. I'll throw that in. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. Thank you. Plan for March election. Claire, 5 minutes.
Okay, we do have past practice on how to do this. In the past, we've had candidates write a statement, which we can then post publicly via the website and the newsletter. And then the charter says that people can stand up and nominate or self-nominate somebody else or self-nominate at the day of the election. And there's an opportunity for people at the meeting where the election is held to make a statement to the community and answer questions. So right now, what we have in place is an online application which people can fill out. It goes to a Google Doc. We can take out the individual responses and redact the things that are private, they don't want to be distributed, and make those publicly available, which we would do after the next board meeting. So obviously people who are asking to be a candidate at the final meeting aren't going to have that opportunity. So that's the process we have in place. I also did mention that we would have that people who are wanted to be on the board would be invited to come to our next board meeting. And John didn't get why we would be doing that, so that might be an item of conversation. Any comments about that procedure? Are we good with that as a way to go?
So Claire, if I may.
Yeah.
I think we suggested that the March election itself would consist of the following steps. We would call for additional nominations. We'd give everyone who is nominated an opportunity to make a statement, then have time for questions and answers from our neighborhood members, and then vote by the process to be determined, and then announce the election results as soon as they're available.
And also, exactly, and the other thing is that people who are not running, board members who are not running and who are not me or John would be responsible for tallying the vote. So I think
the charter states specifically that 2 members who are not running should do that.
Yeah. So Dan, you have your hands up. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I don't know how we're going to think about doing this without having some level of credentialing. We need to put in plan a process. I would recommend that the same body that's talking about doing the OWL system or something along those lines come up with a standard operating procedure, an SOP for verifying that who is in the meeting is capable of voting, and how they voted are reflected in the roll call votes for each election, because I can see folks showing up and saying, oh yeah, I've attended 3 meetings this past year, or just voting and they're not able to. And now we're gonna have, if it's especially if it's close, we could see challenges to votes, and if we don't have any way of identifying who's capable of voting, who's authorized to vote, and how they voted, that's going to be an absolute cluster.
That's
And
really
that was the
important. And
first
it's
criterion in our,
let me,
go ahead.
It is in the criteria for the voting process, as John was about to say. And I'd also say that we are compiling an updated list of everybody who has attended a meeting and given the proper information for identifying in the past, since last March. So we will have that master list to compare voters against. How that can be done efficiently is still being investigated. Charlie, did you want to say something about that? Are we done with that? Okay. Does that answer what you're saying?
It does. I'd say that there's the easy way, which is a lot of problems, and then there's a more lengthy way, which is more straightforward, which is just to have a voice roll call. If we have a master list, we just go down the list of yays and nays, and then we have their vote on record. We have their voice on record. It's going to be recorded, and we can have a tally right then and there. If we say everyone vote, then we could have a screen capture, and did one person slip a vote in? We didn't know, and just I can see.
Well, it's even more complicated than that, Daniel, because we have 5 candidates, so it's not one question.
Oh, I know.
We have more than one.
It's Joshua. Joshua, you have your hand up.
Oh, I just wanted to say really quick that I think in the charter, it specifies that it's like a secret ballot or something. So I don't know that it would be really appropriate for us to have it be just like a roll call, unfortunately, which that would make it easy.
John?
May I suggest these are things we are charging that committee with, to come back with, and that we'll have information for you next month.
If you have concerns that you want to be sure the committee looks into, you can why don't you email them to Joshua, because he's the chair of that committee. Okay.
And if you want to be on the committee, please let Joshua know.
All right. I think that's the end of that item. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next item.
Yes, item number 8, number 6, approve the board job description. Claire, you have 10 minutes for this one.
Okay, when I talk to people about running for the board, the first thing they ask me is, what's the job description? We have a job description, which we've had for some time, and it was called draft, and we've never really ratified it. We sent it out to everybody in the meeting packet. Is it necessary to review that, or you want to take a minute to look at it before voting to approve it? I'm going to give you a few minutes to look at it. I would say it's the exact same thing that we've had on file as a draft for years, except that we added board members as community leaders, model good civic behavior in community activities. John.
Well, since you're suggesting this is a motion that needs to be made, I move that we approve the job description for board members prior to the March elections, and we approve the description listed in the agenda.
Okay, Jackie, do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
I know, but Jackie raised her hand before you did. Do we have a second to that to John's motion? No second.
I think Dan just raised his hand.
Oh, I can't see Dan for some reason. Jackie?
So Dan, are you seconding?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question about 2A. I don't think those are the names of a couple of those committees anymore, so I think those are inaccurate. I don't know if we want to take the names of the committees out or just update them to what is correct, but those are, I think, old names.
Good point. Yeah, that was
Well,
intended. Yeah.
If I may, it says such as. So It's not a specific list, but a list of examples.
Yeah, that's true. It's supposed to be examples for board service and community service to choose from. Would anybody have objection to just updating those names before we? Charlesy?
Oh, I have no objection to that. Is this, I would just like to add, I hope this is the right time, that I would want to vote for this list for tonight, but I would really like us to revisit this in the future. And based on the conversation, the presentation that Robert gave, and possibly other training we might get to beef this up even more.
Okay, Harry?
So I had a question of 2E does not seem like an objective standard, that it's open for interpretation. What is good civic behavior?
Okay, what's your question? You don't know what good civic behavior is?
I would move that we strike that for not being clear and objective.
Anybody second that?
But otherwise, we
I
just
don't-
leave it open to interpretation that anybody can accuse anybody of doing something that is not civic behavior, and then their name be dragged in front of this board again, which started this whole mess that brought Robert here to begin with. So
Does anybody want to second Harvey's motion? I'm sorry, Harry's motion. I don't see any. Jan? Are you seconding or you want to comment? You're muted.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think Harry makes a good point there.
Okay. Any further discussion? Chelsea?
Well, I can envision in the future us adding things like board members agree to work collaboratively toward building consensus. And again, you could say, well, we don't really know how to, I mean, those aren't absolutes, but those are important standards. And so at some point, you do have to put something in there. Yes, it's a point for discussion, but that's why we have a board to discuss and to try to come up with consensus opinions on. It doesn't make it wrong that it's not absolute. Thank you.
I think that we need to have, we will be having a board retreat after the election where we can fill out more of our bylaws that would address these particular things. And this is a job description. And the job description is to model good citizenship in the community.
Mm-hmm.
John.
Yeah, I wonder, do we need to make this decision tonight?
Well, do we want to have candidates for the board by next meeting? Because this is why it's on the agenda. It's because people want it.
I take it your answer is yes, we have to do it tonight.
I feel it does. Does anybody disagree?
Well, I'm thinking that we could postpone this decision until next month because there's obviously some contention, and we can make that available to the candidates who submit any nominations and make it available on our e-news after that meeting as well. I agree it's a sticky wicket. If you don't think we should postpone to a time certain next month, I won't make that motion.
Jackie?
My personal thought on that specific item 2E is that it's not quite measurable like the other items in that category. The other items in there are kind of either you can do them or you don't do them. This one speaks to the quality of how you're doing something, which is a little subjective. So I don't know that that quite fits in that section.
Okay, I think we should just vote on Harry's motion to take out that item and try to pass the job descriptions. So all in favor of taking that item off of the job description, raise your hand. Okay, I see You have to raise it electronically. I just see two. Three. All again, all in favor of leaving it in. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna abstain. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It would have to be 5 because there are 9 of us and you're abstaining.
Yeah, 5 with 1 abstention. Okay, so it stays in, and it can also be raised and reevaluated when we work on our bylaws for next time around. Harry, I see your physical hand up. I'm not sure what to do with that.
You're also muted, Harry.
I think Dan had pointed out last time that in the reactions, there's a check or an X. Going forward, when we have a vote, would it be easier to just have the affirmative green check and the negatives red X?
It might be more efficient. It's not how Robert's rules works, but
it could concede, it can work.
okay. Okay, thank you for the suggestion. Okay, we're ready to move on.
Well, we need to vote on the main motion.
We did.
No, we voted on Harry's motion to amend the main motion.
Okay, so all in favor of passing the job description as is, voting yes, vote now.
I vote green.
Vote green and no, vote red. 4, 1, 2, I've got 3. Dan, once again, I can't see you. I don't know why you're.
His is green.
His is green. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 greens, 2 reds.
How about yourself, Claire?
Again, I'm going to abstain. Okay, so the motion passes to go ahead and publish the job descriptions as is, with the caveat that will be revisited as we develop our bylaws.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Discuss all information resulting in December vote on vaccination clinic. Harry, there are 10 minutes for this item, and I request that you spend up to 2 minutes introducing it and making your motion.
Okay, yeah, this is in reference to the discussion we had over the past month of both the general and the board meetings. There were claims made by the Social Justice Committee, but there was no documentation or proof to back up those claims. And I think that, you know, there's also a question. John, you had sent me some criteria. I was trying to find it, but when we create a committee, whether it's a standing committee or a temporary committee, I couldn't find that information on the Social Justice Committee. As well, they haven't published their agenda to the board members, and so it just seems like they're in violation of the charter at the moment. And I think it's a shame this whole procedure has gone down. It just seems in violation of our community of decorum. So, you know, my question is, you know, it's unclear whether we're an organization that strictly adheres to rules and processes like we're doing tonight, or if we're a loosely formed group of neighbors casually meeting to discuss ongoing concerns and providing a platform for neighborhood engagement like it says in our charter. So my suggested motion is to uncover some of the background on how the Social Justice Committee came to accuse a singular board member, and how we passed a vote without getting the information that the vote was supposed to be passed on. So my suggested motion is that the Social Justice Committee and the RRCO board fully disclose all information relating to the Howard Elementary vaccination clinic, including discussion before, actions, and the communication that led to the accusations against a board member.
Okay, is that your motion, Harry?
That's my motion.
Is there a second?
I don't see any seconds. Also, John, and you need to uncheck yourself.
Oh, I think not just my, oh, I'm the last one left. Thank you. Harry, there's no second. Sorry.
So
Shall we move on to the next
Does that
item?
preclude any discussion then, or may I have more of the 10 minutes to?
If there's no motion, I don't see what we need to talk about, Harry.
Okay. Well, I mean, we talk about how this political process silences the voices that are in the minority. And to me, goes
I hear
against
your
what Robert
statement.
talked about earlier. So,
Let's move on to the next item, which is also yours, to reconsider vote held on vaccination clinic. Harry, I need to tell you that Robert's Rules of Order specifically state in order to reconsider a motion, it has to be done at the very next meeting, and that motion needs to be made by somebody who voted in the affirmative on the motion. You did not vote in the affirmative, so you cannot make that motion. But you can describe what you want to do and see if anybody makes it.
Hey,
Wait, before you start, I see, Dan, I see your hand is up. Is this relevant to this discussion or the previous discussion?
This one, I'm getting a lot of feedback. There's somebody who has a unmuted thing, and so I'm hearing bits and pieces of Harry of what you're saying. I get the basic gist of what you're saying, but it's really hard. If it's hard for me, it's gonna be hard for other people.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
So Harry, you have 10 minutes. Assuming you get a motion.
So the background on this one is the actions proposed directly against a board member do not promote understanding and have fostered an ongoing resentment between multiple members of the RRCO board. The distraction of attempting to wield power not assigned to RRCO, let alone a committee within RRCO, has deteriorated our sense of community. I am a neighbor. I participated in a social justice event with other neighbors and concerned members of the greater area community. This action, being condemned by the RRCO board, demonstrates a hostility against neighbors experiencing disabilities, as well as bias against religious and political beliefs in violation of City of Eugene policy. Continuing to present the bias to the community will prevent the inclusion of all neighbors in the River Road Community Organization. And so my suggestion is whether we discuss whether we acted in haste last month on the motion to submit a letter to multiple public bodies, typos and all, denouncing the actions of our own neighbors without seeing the actual evidence claimed by the Social Justice Committee. So I wanted to discuss whether the goal of RRCO is to push a political agenda or whether it is to promote understanding between neighbors. And I wanted to discuss how to restore trust in each other as neighbors and not see each other as partisan activists, how we prevent the neighborhood association from being misused simply as a platform for partisan political agendas. And I will add to what John had brought up during the previous discussion with Robert Brack. The Social Justice Committee was communicating with county commissioners and sent an email to the board that seemed to be pre-approved by the board, yet we as a board or a neighborhood never discussed this. And so, when we're talking about how do we represent ourselves, how does the Social Justice Committee represent itself?
30 seconds, Harry.
It's not acting with the express authorized consent of the board or the membership.
Hey, Dwight, I see your hand
The
up.
motion is listed, but I can't make it, so I'll leave that to further discussion.
I second the motion.
There's
not a motion.
So Harry's suggested motion is the RRCO board will reconsider the vote held on the December board meeting until the previous information is disclosed, along with the evidence supporting the accusations made by the Social Justice Committee that to date has only been accepted on good faith and not due diligence. Are you proposing to make that motion, Dwight?
Oh, no, I thought Harry did.
No, Harry cannot make that motion.
Oh, okay. In that case, I submit the motion.
Okay. Is there a second from anyone who, well, Harry, you can second it now. Okay, Harry seconds. Discussion.
We
Claire?
have available to us that evidence, and it has been publicly disseminated. It's video evidence, and I don't know, Joshua, we can't share the screen, right? I don't know if we want to take the time to review it now, but it has been publicly disseminated. John, I see your hands up.
The motion we passed and the letter we sent was speaking specifically to the fact that we did not support the behaviors of the people present, not their political beliefs. So for that reason, I voted for that motion, and I will vote against this motion.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Harry has his hand up. Harry?
So, I mean, I didn't feel like I had a chance to discuss the merits of what you're saying or defend the actions that I witnessed there, which were not a violation of any law. I was so focused on defending my good name that you were trying to drag through the mud, a complete and utter violation of decorum, that it distracted from the actual thing that we were discussing, and we never really got to discuss the actual thing we were discussing. I would just ask, I mean, there was a point in our neighborhood last summer, 2020, where I believe people in this call were marching down Maxwell and blocking traffic on Maxwell and occupying the street. Is that also an action that we would denounce?
Jan's hand is up.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but we discussed this a month ago, and at that point, Harry's name was in that letter, but Harry's name was removed from that letter. Is that correct?
That's correct. John.
That's all I have to say.
John, your hand is up.
Yes, we do have evidence of people yelling to people in their cars with their children, you're killing your child. That is what we complained about. That is fact, and we have video to support it. I'm done.
I have a point of order question.
Okay.
I'm not clear what exactly the question is that's on the table that's being discussed. It seems like we're re-litigating stuff that was completed before.
Dwight has moved and Harry has seconded. We will reconsider the vote, which is why we're discussing.
Should we call the question then? Because we've been discussing
If
quite a
you have
while.
no further discussion and there's time for discussion hasn't elapsed.
Has it?
I think we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay, Harry, your hand is up.
Yeah, so again, it's really just a procedural question. We made a vote. John says we saw it. Claire says we saw it. But that was never sent to me, and I don't know if it was sent to Jan or Dwight or Dan or Charlesy or Zainin. And so when you say we've seen it, that's not what we saw in the public meeting. The public did not see that. And so we're operating on what you're calling offensive or intimidating behavior. And again, you made an accusation against me, and if you say you saw it, did you see me doing it? And if not, why did you feel licensed to make an accusation against me personally? And I mean, come on, guys.
No, you come on. John?
Yes,
Joshua?
once again, Harry, your name is not involved in the letter, so it's a moot issue. Joshua, could you play that MP4 and because you have it?
No, we can't share anything because it was disabled before the meeting started. So there's no.
But can you play it on your computer and we can hear it?
I don't know, maybe. But
why don't you see if you can queue it up, and we'll take care of Harry's concern.
Okay. But I just wanted to say, as my comment too, though, that like I think the reason that Harry's name was included originally was because he stood up on the public record at the Lane County Court, at the Lane County Commissioners meeting, and was essentially recruiting for the meeting and calling on law enforcement to stand down in order to avoid conflict. And I think that's what got people shocked, and that's what sort of indelibly involved Harry's name in this thing. I don't think people were suggesting that Harry was spotted shouting, you're murdering your children, that was, that was just people at the event that he recruited for. And so I think that was where the initial impetus, I'm guessing, came from to include your name. But then, again, upon discussion, I feel like you and Zainin made valid points, and we all agreed that, it did seem like it said enough without your name in there to get the point across, and it was removed. I guess I just don't see an issue. I can try to play the video clip and see if everybody can hear it, but I don't know.
We have about 2 minutes left before we need to vote, unless someone votes to extend.
John, do you have your hand up still, or is it down?
It's down.
Okay. Joshua, is your hand down?
Oh, yeah. I mean, unless you guys want me to try to play the video and see if everybody can hear it, but I can't share it, so I don't know if anybody will be able to hear it more than but I can lower my hand.
Is there any comments from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Okay. So are you trying to cue it up, Joshua? John?
I will try to cue it up.
Okay, Harry?
Can you hear that?
Oh, we got it there.
So I did go in front of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. That's a public meeting. I did not represent myself to be a member of RRCO or a board member of RRCO. And Jolene reached out to me about this directly, and I answered her directly with her questions, and I explained the comments that I made and how that was an attempt to create dialogue and work with the county commissioners. As the Social Justice Committee had access to the county commissioners, I was trying to do the same thing. I was trying to represent voices in our neighborhood. And I really find it offensive that the board here would not vote to disclose all of the back conversations that led to these accusations and these understandings. People have seen this video that was never sent to me. Not once was this video sent to me.
Okay,
So
we've heard this argument already, and some other people have their hands up. No,
What's your point of order, Harry?
I have the floor at the moment.
You have 20 more seconds.
Thank you. I never saw this video. There's board business being conducted behind closed doors, and that's a violation of the public trust. Thank you. I see my time.
Dan has his hand up.
Yeah, real quick, something I don't think I said in the last meeting that when I had a conversation privately with Harry that I promised I would do. In our 2 meetings ago, I kind of doubled down on what I remember, which was incorrect, that Harry represented himself as a member of the board to the county commissioners, which he didn't. That was inappropriate for me to say that with certainty without it being certain. So I want to make sure that I was on record saying such.
Thanks for the clarification, Dan. John?
Yes, I'm going to try to play this video and see if you can hear it. Can you hear it? Okay.
Yeah.
That video has people yelling to people, "You are murdering your children." And that's what we wrote our letter about. You'll just have to take my word for it, Harry. I suggest we vote.
Okay. So, John, are you leading this section of the meeting? I thought you were.
I can, sure. So let's vote again using the red and green dots. If you support this motion to withdraw the letter, which would be a letter, we would send a letter of retraction to the 3 bodies we have sent the letter to. If you want to withdraw, then vote with a green dot. If you are opposed to withdrawing, vote with a red dot.
If you're able to hear me, I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Okay. So I see 2 yeses, 6 noes, and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. And erase your dots.
The motion
It's
does
not
not
passed.
pass. Okay, going back to the agenda. RRCO Board Policy on Equity, Harry, you again have 2 minutes to present your proposal and your motion.
Okay, so I have no background. I mean, we've already discussed this. My point here isn't to rehash what's already happened. We did remove my name, and I appreciate that. But it's a question of inclusion and whether all neighbors are being represented by the board that supposedly represents all neighbors. And so what I wanted to do is to the discrimination and segregation of businesses and organizations in the neighborhood that are opposing medical freedom. People are getting fired for not getting a vaccine. People are not allowed to go into a store without a mask, or in some cases, if they haven't had the vaccine. And that is discrimination. That is segregation. Whether you agree with the basis of it shouldn't really be the question here. The question is, do we support segregation and discrimination in our neighborhood? So my proposed motion is the RRCO board supports equality for all neighbors. We support medical freedom and the rights of all neighbors, regardless of political affiliation, disability, race, or religion, to access commercial businesses in the River Road neighborhood and seek gainful employment without discrimination. And I would add community organizations and public buildings as well to that with commercial businesses.
Okay, thank you, Harry. There's your motion. Does anyone second it? Dwight, are you seconding?
I
Okay.
don't see any second.
I think Dwight seconded, right? Dwight, you're muted.
Would you unmute Dwight, please?
Okay, yeah, I did not second it. I forgot to take my check mark down from the last vote.
Okay.
Okay.
So does anyone else second the motion?
I see no seconds.
Okay, motion fails for lack of a second.
Glad to know you support discrimination. Thank you.
Harry, we're moving on to the next item. Item number 10, action on Zippo laminators. Claire, 5 minutes. And in 2 minutes to present it and make your motion, please.
Okay, so at the last meeting, we had a lengthy discussion, last general meeting, about the Zippo issue. And people agreed that we should send a letter to the council, city council, asking them to expedite their actions on code revisions for that. In the interim, John and I have met with Claire Surratt, who said that that would be a useful letter, that she is putting forward that issue for the work session of the city council. And so I make a motion that we go ahead and write that letter and send that letter.
So if I may.
Yeah.
The motion is direct the chairs to send a letter to the Eugene City Council expressing our appreciation of the work session on toxic pollution, including Zippo laminates vibration disturbance, has been approved, and we request that it be scheduled with all due haste. Additionally, we ask that they amend the noise ordinance so it enables the city to ban vibrations at least during sleeping hours. Is there a second?
Joshua's your hand up to second?
I second.
Okay.
Okay.
Who was the second?
Joshua.
Joshua. If I may add one more thing in case anyone is not aware, Claire Surratt is our city councilor.
Yeah. Any discussion? Jan?
Yeah, this isn't necessarily to modify the letter, but I just see their Zippo's behavior as just their profit making they consider to be more important than the well-being of the neighborhood. So I just want to make that comment, and it's not the only business that manifests that kind of behavior. We live in a whole society where that's typical. So I think pushback is appropriate, even if it's a very timid pushback. I'm in favor of the letter. That's all.
Another point of information is that about 4 or 5 people did sign up to follow up with this from the community, and I put them all in touch with each other to take independent action. Harry?
Harry has his hand up.
So I like this suggestion. I don't know that I see it here in the what's written in the agenda, but to work with them to amend the operating hours seems like the most reasonable path forward. And I see some noise ordinance comments, but again, I guess I would suggest that to them as well.
John?
We made that specific request when we talked to Mr. Goldberg, I think is his name, and he declined to consider that.
Well, he said he didn't have the that wasn't
authority.
part of the authority, but that
Okay.
doesn't mean that the company can't.
Well, we could send a letter to, a cover letter to the Zippo folks, informing them, as we told them we would, that we sent this letter to council and request that they solve the problem themselves. Is that what you're suggesting, Harry? Okay, is the maker and the seconder of the motion willing to accept that? I guess I made the motion.
Yes.
I accept
Okay.
it. Jan, do you accept it?
Yeah.
That was Joshua's the seconder.
Oh,
Okay.
Joshua, Jan spoke in favor. Joshua accepts. Okay, so we would add that we will send a copy of this letter along with a request that the owners of Zippo take care of this problem themselves, so we don't have to go, that there would not, legislation would not have to be passed. Okay? Does that work for you, Harry? Okay, thank you.
So call the question.
I see nobody asking to speak.
Okay, so all in favor of sending such a letter to the city council? See, okay. That looks like a not unanimous vote.
Okay. We've got one more item on the agenda, and I would like to bring back one item from the consent calendar because it's time sensitive. So let's decide, and that's number D. So let's decide how we're going to do our future meetings and then do item D if everyone agrees, because we are over time. So I move we extend for 20 minutes so we can do this. That requires a second, or we'll have to immediately end our meeting.
Chelsea seconds.
I'm not sure it's debatable.
Okay.
I believe it is not. So shall we just vote?
Yeah.
All those
So
in
are
favor,
we voting? Okay.
red and green, please. Okay, we have a majority. We have 20 more minutes. So next item is our next general meetings. First of all, let me fill you in on what I think we do have for our next general meetings. March, we need to do February. March, I assume, will be primarily focused, if not completely focused, on board elections. April, we have traditionally included a candidates forum. This year, we'll be electing a new county commissioner, as we are now in the West Lane district and Jay Bosevich is not running for re-election. Our city council, Claire Charette, is not up for re-election, but our state senator, state representative, and EWEB commissioner are up. So I suggest we make that a candidates forum. But the question is, what about February? We agreed we would have an informational discussion about ODOT and the city's plans for relieving congestion on the section of Beltline between River Road and Delta Highway. Franny Brindle of ODOT has agreed to participate. I assume Jan would like to provide the other half of that discussion, but I'm thinking that might take as much as 30 to 40 minutes, which means we need another 20 or 30 minutes. So I guess the first question, and I don't think we have to vote, we can do a straw poll. Shall we have that discussion that we agreed we wanted to have about Beltline? So please vote.
Dwight has his hand up. I don't.
Dwight?
Oh, I had I'm getting a lot of feedback on the motion to extend the meeting. I did not catch who seconded that. And it would be real helpful if I
Charles
could
did.
unmute myself when I need to. Thank you.
Charles seconded it, and I believe it was a unanimous vote.
It was unanimous. Thank you.
Harry?
Is this the topic that when we were discussing with Rob and Mark from Best as well, would it make sense to invite them to participate?
Bob and Mark from where?
Rob, Best, Better Eugene Springfield Transportation.
I wasn't going to propose that. That's a possibility.
I was just curious. It seemed like Jan was having a conversation with them in regards to this topic. So Jan, you might be able to speak better to that.
Jan, you're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, technology doesn't always work. Harry, I think you're referring to Rob Zako with Best. Yeah, I would be, if this is a little bit new, are we then considering having 30 or 40 minutes about Beltline pluses and
Yes.
minuses? Yeah, well, I'm totally for that, and I would like to participate. And I think that that Rob could be a potential guest for that also. But I suspect that what we would be looking for doing is having several of us with interest to form a program committee to propose to the board about what would be that part of the agenda for February.
Well, we won't have a board meeting before the February meeting. I think having a committee to do that would be fine. If the board agrees we have 30 to 40 minutes to do it, hopefully they would agree to allow the committee to formulate that program and we could share it. And if there's any objections, we can modify as that happens. Does that work for you?
Yeah. So do we need to make a proposal?
I think we're doing it.
We're doing that, or is this a motion that we
No.
need to vote on? No, it's not.
We already moved to present this. We're just talking about doing it next month.
Yeah.
We already approved it. So I guess the appropriate thing to do would be to ask if folks are, if anyone is uncomfortable with this as one of the items for February. Speak now or hear the presentation. Okay, I see no opposition. Does anyone who wants to work with Jan and myself and anyone else who wants to be on this committee?
Should we identify a little bit about maybe a first bit of an explanation about what we'd be talking about? This is about congestion. This is about capacity enhancement. Almost always leads to more traffic.
Jan,
well,
there's no objection, so we're going to do it.
It's a huge topic. I welcome it. I welcome the topic.
Okay, does anyone want to work with Jan and myself to formulate the program? I would like a third so we don't have an impasse with an even number.
John and I disagree all the time, don't we?
Yeah, respectfully. Okay, I see no volunteers. You can always volunteer later. For now, we're a committee of 2. So that still leaves us 20 minutes or so for the rest of the meeting. We can always adjourn early. Does anyone have any other topics they would like to explore at our next meeting? Claire.
I just want to encourage people to, when you have conversations with the community, that they can make proposals to the board for what they would like to see us have at meetings, discuss at meetings. And of course, you can make a proposal to the co-chairs at any time, not just in meetings.
That was in the consent calendar, but it was pulled. So,
yeah.
Okay. So it looks like we will have a short meeting, or we have an opportunity for an extended conversation, Jan. We'll talk about it.
Harry has his hand up.
Harry?
Were we not going to address any of the items that we pulled out of the consent calendar?
That's going to be next, but I want to
Okay.
finish this one first. Okay, let's move on. I would like to, if we're going to consider any, and we only have 5 more minutes, I would like to consider the motion. Let me move to the top. Motion D, which it says to be considered in attendance at RRCO and general and board Zoom meetings, attendees shall use the Zoom chat function to send a direct private message to the RRCO secretary or other designated RRCO board member, who is Charlesy, in which they provide their first and last name, physical address, email address, and phone number, which will be optional. The data will be added to the RRCO membership database and stored securely by RRCO. I'm going to make that motion. Is there a second? Charlesy seconds. Okay, a little bit of explanation. The reason it's there is because Claire and I announced this in order to meet the requirements of our charter for establishing a sign-in list in these COVID times. So that's, but I thought it was important that the board ratify that decision. So open for discussion. Harry, your hand's up.
Yeah, so, again, I would point this as another area where it seems like board business is being done behind closed doors. This just came out as a proclaimment from you and Claire, and we never discussed this.
Which is why we're here now.
Correct. I personally would suggest that we require people to register for the Zoom, and by registering for the Zoom, that would verify their details that you're asking for here. And that would be a cleaner way to accomplish a sign-in.
Harry, I don't believe Zoom asked you for your address, and we can't confirm that a person is a voting member unless we know they live at work or have a business in the neighborhood. Live, own property, or have a business in the neighborhood. So how do you propose we do that with your suggestion?
Well,
Can I speak to that?
Discuss it as a committee if that's not tangible, if that's not feasible, rather.
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
May I speak to that?
Yeah, Claire.
Let Harry finish first.
Well, so we haven't,
Okay.
we've thought about that in the past and we haven't implemented it because in meetings where I've been to, where you have to pre-register, it's like another hoop that people have to go through before they can access the meeting. I think it's something to look into, but there is that drawback. John, I'm done.
Joshua, then Charlesy, then Joshua.
I just wanted to say, I've been doing a little bit of reading, just thinking about this stuff of the Zoom features. And I think that if you have the Zoom webinar feature, that it allows you to set up a form that you can add some fields and people can fill them out. So theoretically, but I don't think that the default Zoom account will do that. Like we'll get address and everything else. I think it might just be like name and email and whatever the default fields are. But I'm not 100% sure.
Well, could you look into it and bring it back for another time?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I mean, we can do that as we got a committee now to figure this stuff out. So that can be one of the things on our list.
Okay, fair enough. Charlesy. You're still not unmuted, sorry.
All right. I just wanted to set the record straight. This was an item in December's board meeting. There was quite a long description of this. This is not something that came about rather suddenly. There's a concern that we wanted to be sure to be in compliance with our charter. We knew the election was coming up. We knew we needed to be able to verify people's addresses and so on. So because we didn't have the time in December for a variety of reasons to deal with it. That's why it's coming up now. So it wasn't, the intention was never to exclude the board from that discussion.
Thank you, Chelsea. We are about out of time in our extension, so I call for the vote now. Again, please vote yes if you're in favor of this motion with a green dot, and no if with a red dot. Vote is 8-1 with Harry opposed. If anyone wants to add any more from the consent calendar for discussion tonight, please state that item and the time we meet, you want us to extend the meeting. Harry. You're muted, Harry.
I move that we extend the meeting 5 minutes to discuss E because that seems like it may be potentially time sensitive. That's the ad hoc committee on Cascade Housing.
And how many minutes did you say? I didn't catch it.
5.
Okay, there's a motion to extend the meeting for 5 more minutes to consider E motion, which is an ad hoc committee to speak with Cascade Housing. Does anyone want to second that? Jan is seconding. Okay, we have 5 minutes. I'll read the motion. The RRCO board creates an ad hoc committee to discuss the neighborhood's interest with Cascade Housing and the development of the River Road Apartments. The primary ones are concerns, interests are providing public access to the West Bank bike path and to provide sufficient vegetative screening from the bike path. The membership is to initially consist of Jolene Simpson, Julie Hume, Becky Riley, John Belcher, and Dwight Owens. And the motion designates me as a chair, but hopefully we'll choose another one at that meeting and have that approved by the board. Was there a second? I forget. Harry, you made the motion and included the motion itself, and I'll second it. So therefore the motion is being considered. Discussion. Claire.
Have all of the suggested participants in that committee agreed to do so?
No, so we may have to amend that too. But we'll bring it back to the board if they decide not to join or if anyone else wants to. But as Harry said, it is kind of time sensitive. Harry, and then Dwight.
That was kind of my concern. I am interested in this committee, and respectfully, John, every committee that I've been on that you're the designated chair has had either one or none meetings, and so I would like to see a different chair. And if anybody else is willing to do that, I am willing to chair this to start.
So are you amending the motion, Harry?
Well, I'm discussing it because I'd like to see if somebody else is interested in that. First, I might support them as well if there's somebody else.
Okay, point of personal privilege, never mind, that's not fair. So you're suggesting that unless you need to make that motion before we vote, Harry. So I'm hearing you suggest it, but it's not a motion to amend. Other discussion?
At this time, I'd like to hear further discussion.
Understood, we're doing that. Dwight.
Again, audio difficulties. Who seconded the motion? And could I please remain unmuted?
Okay, does that help?
Yeah, who seconded the motion?
It's late. Who second? Could you raise your hand? I think Jan seconded it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Jan seconded. Further discussion?
Jan has his hand up.
Yes, Jan. You're muted, Jan.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I can appreciate Harry's comment. I've noticed the same thing. John is extremely capable, but it's good to spread some of this responsibility around a little bit too. But can that committee discuss this and decide what they want to do with that topic? With who would be the and I think even John said, I'll do it until we make another plan. You know, that works for me.
That's specifically what I said I would do,
Yeah,
Jan,
yeah.
is to convene the committee and then ask them if they want to elect
Yeah,
another chair.
I'm good with that.
Okay,
And
thank you.
and if Harry is involved with the committee, then he can make his case for either him or somebody else, you know, to be the chair of that committee. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I don't need another committee. I just picked it because I knew I would be doing it, at least the first meeting. Thank you, Jan. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see any further discussion. Harry, if you want to make your motion, now's the time.
So John, let me apologize for the way I framed that. You are a busy guy, and I didn't mean to say that you're derelict in your duties. I joined this organization because land use is my #1 interest, and I volunteered for every land use committee that we've had, and I haven't felt included. So that's my area of concern. So with that, I would move to amend this, that I would be designated chair of the committee. And again, that would be addressed once the committee forms, and the committee would select their own chair once it's formed.
Okay, is there a second to Harry's motion? I see none. Oh, Jana, you're seconding it?
Yeah.
Okay. Further discussion on the amendment to the motion to appoint Harry as the chair of this committee.
Oh, wait, is this Harry being?
You withdraw your second. Okay.
Yeah, I thought the motion was for the committee to choose that's just sensible that the committee would choose together what chair they would want. I thought that's what this motion was.
Thank you, Jan. Does anyone else second Harry's motion?
I second.
Okay, further discussion. Okay, let's vote green and red. All those in favor of Harry being replaced as the convening chair of this committee, vote with the green. All those opposed with the red.
Nothing personal. No, Harry, the JV board member. Thanks.
Jan, I don't know your vote.
Yeah, so is, just for clarification, is Harry saying he wanted to convene and then?
Harry moved that he would be the initial chair. So do you, in replacement of me, what is your vote, Jan? No, okay, the vote fails 6-2 or 2-6. Dan, I
Is
assume you
Jackie
voted no?
abstaining?
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain from this one.
Okay, 2-6 and 1 abstention. Got that, Dwight?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else want to bring another item from the consent calendar with a motion with time to spend?
It's 9 o'clock. I move to finish.
A motion to adjourn is not debatable and is immediately voted on. So remove your green and reds. And now vote on this motion. The motion is to adjourn. Dwight, I assume that's a yes. Harry, are you voting? I guess we'll consider Harry an abstention. With an 8-0 vote and 1 abstention, unless you want to vote now, Harry. I'm sorry, Harry, you're muted.
I was just gonna say why bother, but yeah, I'm abstaining.
Okay, the vote is 8-0 with 1 abstention. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, including those people in the audience that have lasted through this meeting. We are adjourned.